My third story of slavery during the 20th century. We're talking about Charlie Calloway and his slave owner, his slave master, Eberhard. First of all, what Eberhard did, he abducted this man under the pretense that Charlie owed Eberhard money. Calloway he resisted this claim. He resisted this lie, this fabrication that Eberhard apparently gave him money. So what did Eberhard do? In the words of the author, he assaulted and degraded the laborer at every imaginable physical and emotional level. He beat and raped his wife. He made her submit to his lustful desires. That was just some of the more emotional things. He also, of course, beat Calloway. And when Calloway tried to escape, when he tried to run away from the plantation, they did something very similar to what they do in the old slave days. They called in what was essentially a slave patrol to come and get him, to search for him, to get dogs, to find him, to bring him back, to drag him back to the plantation so that he would never do that again. He was chained to a bed next to a sick laborer in a very obvious sense of sexual humiliation. And psychologically, Calloway was forced to be a part of the crippling of his son. He was forced to hold down his very own son, his very own flesh and blood, while Calloway broke his legs. Imagine that. Imagining having to hold your son down while you're a slave master, right? This white man stands over you, whipping your son, beating his legs until he's no longer able to walk again, unable to walk again for the rest of their entire life, just for trying to live your life on your own terms. How are you going to say 1865 was the end of slavery when this was happening in the early 20th century? This was happening. This wasn't even that abnormal. Oh, wait. This specific example was, I believe, in about 1890. But these stories, they extend to 1900, 1903, 1920, 1940, 1960. This one specifically was about 1890. There's many others that are just as bad and even sooner, even more, as you could say, recently. After having to be a part of the process of crippling his own son, he was forced to sign over to Eberhard, his remaining kids. He was forced to sign away their lives until they were 21 years old as like apprentices, with two of them still nursing. Two of them were still being nursed by their mothers. They were quite literally taken from their mother's arms. This slave master took as black man's children as a message, as a move. Lincoln didn't do shit. If this is the freedom he died for, then what freedom is this? If this is the slavery, if this is what's left after the slavery he supposedly abolished, then what was even the point of him? What is the point of celebrating him if this is what happens, if this is the alternative, this kind of shit? Because slaves during this time, they were treated arguably even worse. Because in the past, before, they were treated more like animals, like a horse. If it does bad, you're going to punish it. You're going to beat it. You're going to, punish it. You're going to make it say, hey, don't do that ever again. You did bad in this race, I'm going to let you know never to do bad in it again. But once this new system came along, that went away. Because instead of being expensive, like cattle or a horse, instead of like a few $100s their time, no, now it's like $10, $15 their time. Slaves, black people were cheap. It became a lot cheaper because of how they could buy them from the courts or quote unquote pay their legal fees. So Lincoln arguably made it worse. Slavery was not abolished. Slavery was not abolished for decades after. Slavery is arguably still not even abolished today. Just read the 13th Amendment. Involuntary servitude, it's slavery and it prohibits. Unless you are in prison. And they've been using this loophole ever since 1865, ever since the 13th damn amendment was ratified.